Hey everyone, can you hear my audio okay? All right, great. Well, good afternoon. My name is Ryan Anderson and I'm the Director of Industry Relations for the University of Nebraska-Lincoln. And I'm also that campus's New Connections Industry Liaison Officer. I want to welcome everyone to the inaugural New Connections webinar focused on the Nebraska Business Innovation Act funding programs, which were administered by our friends at the Nebraska Department of Economic Development. After my brief introduction, you'll hear from Sarah Bennett, Associate Director of the Nebraska Business Development Center and New Connections Industrial Liaison Officer for the University of Nebraska Kearney campus. Sarah will explain the logistics of the question and answer portion of our webinar and also provide a short overview of New Connections, a system-wide entity to increase NU campus's engagement with business and industry. After that, Ben Kuspa, Business Innovation Consultant with the Nebraska Department of Economic Development, will present the Business Innovation Act program overview, followed by me offering a few comments and suggestions to our academic attendees to assist with their BIA proposal considerations and proposal development. We'll then have plenty of time for interactive Q&A via the chat mechanism. And this webinar is being recorded, so you know, and will be made available along with the presentation. So please keep that in mind as you make your comments and pose your questions. And on behalf of all the panelists, I also want to extend a special thanks to my industry relations colleague, Suzanne Spies, for her nimble and capable coordination of this webinar. Again, thank you very much, Suzanne. So without further delay, I will turn you over to my colleague, Sarah Bennett.
Good afternoon. We're gonna show a screen here. Hang on just a moment. So how the question and answer session will proceed. I imagine most of you have utilized Zoom before, but you'll enter your questions in the chat function. We will answer those at the conclusion of Ben's presentation, unless there's one that seems appropriate to address during the presentation itself. If you do have issues with the chat function and not being able to submit your questions, alternatively, you can email them to me, to my email address there on the screen, bennett.sa2@unk.edu. So as Ryan was mentioning, so with NU Connections, and hopefully you guys can see this screen. It's showing up on your end? Excellent. And the meeting format, it has a green box around it, and apparently in webinar it does not have the green box. So what this is it's a collaboration between the University of Nebraska and all 4 campuses. Our intent is to create an opportunity for business and industry to engage with the University of Nebraska. There's tremendous assets, tremendous strengths inside of our university. With the research that you are doing as faculty members, maybe it's inside of the labs or the various work that you're doing, and we want to foster that collaboration and provide some opportunities to do so. And today's presentation is one of those such formats with funding available through the Nebraska Department of Economic Development to encourage those collaborations, whether it's through academic research and development funding or it's through the state level of SBIR and STTR. So that's our intent there. So how does the process work? Essentially what we're looking at is a business might identify a problem or a need. They approach one of the campus liaison officers and then we connect from there. So it might be maybe a collaboration that's a fit for one of the institutes that's part of the university system. Maybe there's an expert in a particular area. Maybe there's various programs or centers and things like that. Trying to create those symbiotic relationships is that goal. So depending on where your campus is, we have a lot of faculty members on this call, as well as some business and industry folks. So in Lincoln, your point of contact is Ryan Anderson. For UNMC, Michael Dixon with UNIMED, the Technology Transfer Office for UNMC and UNO. At UNK, that's myself, Sarah Bennett, and then Nebraska Business Development Center, which I'm also a part of. We are a statewide program working with businesses, and we put the grant together to be able to have this university center through New Connections. So Kathy Lang and then Harold Sargis. So if you want to check out some more information, the website is there at the bottom. So nbdc.unomaha.edu/new connections. Now we're going to toss it back over to Ben, and he's going to dive into what you are here for.
Thank you. I'm going to share my screen really quick. There we go. So thank you, Ryan. Thank you, Sarah and Suzanne, for setting this up. I appreciate you setting time aside. My name is Ben Kuspa. I work for the Nebraska Department of Economic Development. Myself, along with Nisha Avey, we administrate the innovation programs at the state. These are programs that were enacted, or they were passed by the legislature in 2011. They really kicked off in earnest in 2012, and we've been working on those since. I started in 2014. I believe Nisha started a little bit before that. I handle there's 4 core programs for the Business Innovation Act that we kind of refer to, and a couple of ancillary ones. So the core programs, we have 3 grant programs. They're matching grants, and we have 1 investment program called the Seed Investment Program that is meant for working capital. I handle prototype and academic R&D. Those are probably the most popular programs. Nisha Avey handles our SBIR program, as well as and we both kind of work on seed investment as where it fits in, depending on who's applying for that program. And then we also have a micro enterprise technical assistance program where we fund some state level entities to provide technical assistance, and then especially in rural areas. And then we have a micro lending program where we provide some capital to those lenders that can fund retail establishment, lifestyle businesses, things like that. So really fledgling businesses that might not be able to qualify for either an SBA loan or a traditional loan. Like I said, 2012, we'll run through each program as we go. If you have questions, please go ahead and populate that chat function, and Sarah or Ryan can take a look at that and see what's, we'll field those at the end. Typically it's about, so the Business Innovation Act programs are $6 million a year in our normal annual budget. That's a shared pool of funds across those 5 programs. So depending on demand, we can shift a little bit of funding around depending on which program has more demand there. We have an emphasis on technology development, bioscience, and agriculture. Those are the things that are really identified by the legislature, bioscience and agriculture being the core ones where we have different matching requirements, and we have a separate fund for bioscience. Bioscience being anything that would be medical device, pharmaceuticals, medical testing, general, industrial biotechnology as well. Like I said, $6 million. The funds are accessed for the grant programs on a reimbursement basis, since they're matching grant programs. If you're approved for a grant, then you have to incur those costs, expend them, and then you request that funding on a ad hoc basis. We're pretty flexible in that terms. The terms, depending on the grant program, can differ, which actual program in terms of timeline-wise, but you do have to expend. There is a private match required for every program except SBIR, STTR, which the federal program covers that match. So first up is our most popular program. That's the Perk grant program. Provides matching funding of up to $150,000 from Nebraska Department of Economic Development for product development. It needs to be used, the funds need to be applied to the development of a product. That's typically labor, materials, that can be contract labor, that can be using a vendor, that can be using a 1099, that can be using an employee, which would be great. That can be getting materials together, and maybe some limited tooling, but really that's the extent of what the intent of that program is to utilize the funds in that manner. We can reimburse 2/3 of the costs. So for a $150,000 program, or project, sorry, we would reimburse 100,000. If it was 225, we could go up to that 150 cap. Our median award is actually around $50,000. This is a program that gets oversubscribed every year. We probably do between 30 to 40 projects per year, and usually it's over $1 million for this program specifically. Last year is about 1.2. Year before that it was 1.4. So it really depends on where the demand is there. It's open to businesses with less than 500 employees that have headquarters or some sort of operations in Nebraska. They need to be, and really to be competitive, you also need to be doing the project here. We don't, initially when there was less demand for this program, we were a little more flexible. Now we're looking at direct economic impact as well. So we're looking at projects that are using local vendors, have employees and have some sort of operation here, and they're doing the actual development of the product in Nebraska. That can vary depending on the program as well. I don't want to put 100% on there, but usually you can come to us with a proposal and we'll look at it and see what might be eligible and what might not be. Like I said, we can reimburse 66% or 2/3 of the project cost for a normal program, up to 80% for if it's deemed value-added agriculture. The definition of value-added agriculture is set in statute. It's essentially anything that will benefit farmers and ranchers in the state of Nebraska. So if you're creating a product that might, we do a lot of agricultural equipment. We do a lot of efficacy testing for feeds and things like that, whatever might benefit there. So if your actual, whatever your product is using is grown or raised in Nebraska, or might assist moving it up the value chain, converting it from a raw commodity into a finished product, that would be something that would qualify for that value-added agriculture match. And in totality, since 2012, we've awarded $12.3 million across 253 projects since 2011. Probably 60% of that is software as a service. The remainder is ag equipment or some medical devices, a lot of sensors, some sort of consolidated system, IoT, and then also other manufactured goods, especially in rural Nebraska where there's a good manufacturing base. We work with a lot of manufacturers out there if they want to add a new product to their line, and we can maybe assist with some of the cost of developing that. The two examples there, Matt McCore is out of Lincoln. They received a prototype grant in 2014. Abe Uman is a serial entrepreneur who developed a new method for DNA RNA testing, primarily in livestock and animal health at the moment. They have a location at the Biotech Connector and Innovation Campus, and they also have a facility that is growing rapidly on Cornhusker Highway. So it'll be interesting to see where that goes. It's been 6 years, so this is a good example of a project that it takes a little bit of time for these things. When we first talked to the founder of that company, he had himself and one or two other people, and he had an 800 square foot space, and it was really in the infancy. Now it's going really well, and they've raised quite a bit of capital to assist with that. Company Cam is also a local Lincoln company that they developed a software app for contractors and suppliers of materials. It might not sound incredibly interesting, but it's essentially a tool to take photos that automatically geotags where your project is happening, and it's a lot of it's to make sure that you're doing the work that you're supposed to do, or the contractor's doing. They've used it. They found other uses for it where contractors will actually check in. The proof of delivery is what a lot of the supply companies enjoy, because when they drop off supplies, usually the person is not there. They can snap a photo, make sure that everything is there. Low cost product, but growing like mad. The great thing about that is they rarely lose clients on that product. I think they're up to 25 to 30 employees in the hay market. Again, I think that was one that we funded in 2014 or 2015, and it's really grown well. So yeah, we do fund a lot of projects. There are companies that go through accelerators such as NMotion, now GBeta. Startup Collaborative, we funded quite a few companies through there, especially when they're developing what we call an MVP, a minimum viable product, software side, or if they're just getting started with the development of a physical good. On the manufacturing side, one of our more recent ones was Malco. Malco makes hand tools for contractors. It's kind of a higher end grade than the home user. They took over the vice grip plant in DeWitt. They are based out of Minneapolis, but they have a growing presence in DeWitt, just south of Lincoln. And they're bringing a whole new line of products there. We're assisting with some of that, a portion of the development cost on that. Other companies to think about, Layer is out of Lincoln. They're a great company that built something to won the Inside Outside or Summit Showcase in last year. Really interesting company that's doing things with business information, or sorry, building information management systems. BrewSense, they developed they're a spin-off of a corporate entity, KZCo, out of Ashland, and they are doing a sensor for brewing equipment. And then Retail Aware was in the news recently. They do sensors for retail storefronts where they can check where people are, how they're interacting with displays, things like that. They were just in the news talking about what the impact of the coronavirus has been on retail traffic. A lot of interesting companies, very interesting program. Seed investment program is the equity investment program. That's for, again, for Nebraska businesses with less than 500 employees. The investment is a matching investment. It's up to $500,000 with a 1-to-1 match. So if they're participating, they need to be part of a round that's matched equally. Unless it's agriculture related, again, they could do the 80% requirement. So if it was a $500,000 round, they could do $400,000 matched by $100,000. That needs to be non-state money. All of our programs need to be matched by Nebraska government money. It needs to be separated somehow, but that's yeah. So the investment needs to be used to commercialize the product. Really, it's working capital. This is something where the due diligence is conducted by an investment is made by Invest Nebraska. Invest Nebraska is a nonprofit venture capital firm out of Lincoln, but they serve the entire state. The process for seed investment starts with us. We take a first glance at it, and then we pass it along to Invest Nebraska to conduct due diligence and comes to terms. They have their own board of people in Nebraska that know how to vet these things, and if it's approved by them, then it comes back to us for funding. If it is successfully funded, then we will transfer the funds to Invest Nebraska, and at that point, it is not state money anymore. If there is a return on investment for the seed investment program, then that goes into an evergreen fund. Essentially, it stays with Invest Nebraska in perpetuity, and they can continue to reuse that. So it's not they're not looking to, they have a double bottom line, we say, instead of just a return on investment. They're also looking for economic development impacts within the state. So they might have a different lens than typical VC. They can lead or they can follow on in rounds if anybody's familiar with the venture capital funding. But they have different instruments they can use if an equity investment isn't right for that particular project. But that is a great follow-on for the grant programs. So a lot of the prototype companies, or a lot of the companies they've funded, started off with a prototype grant, got some traction, and then got some seed investment later on, or at least the Invest Nebraska participated in a round. A lot of those companies also might have started with an academic R&D grant or had an academic R&D grant at some point in time. They've received the probably largest value of funds, $13.9 million invested over 61 investment rounds since 2011. That's Invest Nebraska's logo. I'd encourage you, if you're interested in seed investment, to actually reach out to Invest Nebraska, talk to Ben Williamson or Dan Hoffman there. You go to their website and fill out their application form. Matt Foley is the third person there. It's a small group, but he runs the Ag Tech Accelerator on Nebraska Innovation Campus as well. Ops Compass is a company that we funded, I believe, in 2015. They do cloud. It's a layer that sits on top of the Azure cloud computing ecosystem and allows companies to better manage security and do interfaces there. They received some, they actually received a grant as well, but then they also have been raising a couple of rounds and they've been growing quite a bit. They've acquired a company out of Omaha to increase their headcount, and they're doing very well. Other companies that we've done or we funded through that, White Dog Labs is a biotech company that is in Sutherland, Nebraska. They're working with the university under an academic R&D grant as well, but they're doing growing fish food, essentially fermenting it, or it's not fermenting, sorry. But the industrial biotech is not my forte, obviously, but they're doing some things with converting ethanol plants into a different higher value product. So primarily around animal feed. KPI Ninja is another one. It's a software company that is out of, started in Hastings actually, and now I think it's in Omaha. They do metrics for dashboards for healthcare. And then we have Quantified Ag, which is located at Innovation Campus, and they have a ear tag for cattle, the Fitbit for cattle, as they've always been referred to. So some really good companies there too. The academic R&D grant program is what we're, is very much of interest to the university and Ryan. We work with Ryan quite a bit to set up projects here. So this is for funding for applied research and development that's conducted in conjunction with the Nebraska College or University. Probably 80% of that has been UNL. The remainder, we've done 2 projects with Creighton, and then the remainder has been UNO and UNMC. But it is open to any Nebraska college or university, can be public or private. It just needs to be a business needs to apply. So it can't be the university isn't actually applying on behalf of this. It's a bit of a more complicated instrument, which is why we lean on our partners at University of Nebraska to assist with this. Usually it takes the form of a sponsored research agreement where the business says, I'm going to pay X to undertake said research. But it can also be a work for hire agreement, as some in the university affiliated institutions like to do, such as the Food Processing Center or the Nebraska Applied Research Institute at UNO. And I think that's kind of, we don't care what that form takes. We just need to have that university or college connection with the project. So it is a phased program. That's the way it was set up by the legislature. It is up to $100,000 from us for phase 1, and it is up to $400,000 for a phase 2. It requires a 1-to-1 match, 4-to-1 for ag again. So we're reimbursing 50% of the costs or 80% for agriculture. There's another way to qualify for this program, which I should mention as well. Unless you can either be commissioning research that the university is assisting with, or you can be licensing a technology from the university that you will then take to market, and you need some additional research and development done on that, but that can be done privately if necessary. But really we focus on the university connection on this, and we prioritize projects where there is some funding that is going to be going to the university for the project. We also have projects where they've been done cooperatively, where the PI is with the university and maybe the actual development team is internal with the business. So we have a project out of Lincoln from Acuvera, or called Acuvera, and they actually had a primary investigator who was overseeing their research or their pilot project in a hospital system, and they are actually doing most of the development work internally. So we're paying same share, same match ratio, same match for the work being done internally as the university as well. So, yeah. The other thing I need to stress here is that it is applied research. So when you think of projects that might be pertinent to this program, they really need to have a potential for a long-term economic development impact within the state of Nebraska. We don't fund projects that are necessarily exploratory in nature. They need to have a strong, potential path to commercialization. So that's something to also think of. We're not a primary research or a pure research project. It is that might be a better fit for a different path. So F&A fees are something that often get talked about. That's facilities and administration. So it's the overhead. So the total direct costs are usually laid out in the sponsor research agreement. That's the salaries, cost, facility, all the fees, and then it's multiplied by an F&A fee as well. A couple of years ago, we added to our guidelines some information about that. We will reimburse a share of up to a 10% F&A fee. If it's above and beyond that, it's the responsibility of the business to actually pay the remainder of that. Sorry if you're getting some background noise. Intellectual property is also asked about a lot. We don't have necessarily a stance on that. I think the question needs to be answered that if you're applying as a business, you need to have the rights to at least commercialize that in some way, shape, or form, or at least there needs to be an option on the table. We don't care what that looks like necessarily. That's more a question for Ryan to figure out what that might look like and how that might be done. And my understanding is, Ryan, do you want to share some information right now about university's position on intellectual property, or do you want to cover that at the end?
I'll touch on that during my comments when you finish up, Ben.
All right, sounds good. A couple of the example projects we've done, Virtual Incision, that is a company that licensed a technology, developed it within the university. I believe it started in 2006. They're making a surgical robot that is mounted on a gantry and much more portable than the existing laparoscopic surgical robots. They received some seed investment funding as part of their raise. As you can imagine, building medical devices of that nature and complexity are very expensive. They also are doing a lot of FDA testing as they're getting ready for that. We provided some academic R&D money for them to site on Innovation Campus, and they've built out that facility there, and they are preparing, if not in throes of getting approved by FDA, which can be a long road, but hopefully we'll hear some good feedback on that project in the near future. New Tech Food Science is also on Innovation Campus. They're also doing fermentation technology for food. They worked with the cell development facility and the food processing center over a number of projects. They have a really healthy relationship there. And they have a research facility in Omaha as well, or kind of their headquarters. We've done a number of different feed trials with the animal science department. I really have to hand it to animal science. They've done great. They do the group that does the cattle research, Galen Erickson, Andrew Watson, all those people, they've done some incredible work, and they're really good about kind of helping people get through our process as well to apply for our program. And we've helped to fund a lot of that, kind of different things to see what the path is there for different animal feeds. That may not sound incredibly interesting, but it is very interesting to ranchers. And the beef report, my understanding is the University of Nebraska beef report is one of the premier publications that people look through and trust. So a lot of that work that we funded has been going into that beef report, or has that University of Nebraska stamp on there that proves that this is a product that can do what it says it does. So that's kind of an efficacy, an example of a product or a research product where we're assisting with that marketing claim as well, that sequence. Other projects we've done, Vestal is also at Innovation Campus. They're doing waste oil. They're doing growing algae. White Dog I already mentioned. Akivera is also mentioned. And then we've also done small projects. So we don't have to do big scale projects. One of our more recent one was a company called Crawford Investments, and they're doing some smaller scale research. I think the smallest project we've done is about $9,000 from us. We're completely open to smaller scale projects as well. So you don't have to be going big. You don't have to do a $100,000 project if it's not in your budget. We'd be happy to look at some other smaller ones as well. Sorry, yeah, 10.2 million over 93 project phases. SBIR STTR, like I said in the start, is actually Nisha, my colleague, who's wasn't able to make it today. So she knows more details on this, but I will try to cover what I can. For the SBIR and STTR program, Small Business Innovation Research, Small Business Tech Transfer, is a grant program that there are 11 federal agencies that collaboratively they handle about $2.5 billion that they grant out to small businesses across the U.S. To commercialize something or do some research that might lead commercialization, similar to our project. The phase 1 rough cap for a federal project is about $250,000. The phase 2, which needs to be preceded by phase 1, is about $1.7 million. There are some deviations from that, but that's the cap without a prior approval. Phase 0 is a program that we handle, so NEDED handles. That is up to $5,000 to assist with technical resources in response to the federal solicitation. Sorry. The phase 1 or 2 matching program can match 65%. So if you land a phase 1, I need to get rid of this. I'm sorry, guys. So phase 0, yeah, it's just to apply. But you need to be hiring somebody to do that. So you need to be using an employee or a grant writer or a technical reviewer, and we will reimburse 100% of the costs, no match required, to apply. You do need to have a good chance of being accepted. It is a competitive program, so you need to make a good case that that money would be well spent and is a good bet. So that's something to be aware of as well. Also, that's one with a hard date on it. You need to apply for that at least 30 days prior to the phase 1 solicitation, the federal solicitation. That's what they call their openings for grants, the request for grant proposals, with 30 days prior to closing. If it's received after that, we can't fund it. But if you do manage to get a phase 1, we'll match 65% up to $100,000 of either phase. That'll be, so it needs to be about $150,000, a little over $150,000 to get $100,000. Or if you receive $100,000 phase 1, that would be $65,000 to us. That can be used for things that SBIR does not cover. Typically, SBIR will cover 100% of most costs, but examples of things where people have used that in the past is they bought equipment that was necessary to kind of expand the scope of research. Maybe they've done some parallel research that is there. Maybe they've hired somebody that wouldn't be covered necessarily by the SBIR grant, but it especially in a phase 1, that can put you know, our money, our hope is that not only will it help the business, but it will help them be more competitive in the phase 2 when they apply for a phase 2. So that's where the winnowing process is what happens with SBIR and STTR. They might fund in response to one solicitation, they might fund 5 or 6 phase 1s, and then they might fund 1 or 2 phase 2s. So, and it does need to, 51% of the project needs to occur within the state of Nebraska. So you can have operations in other places, but you need to have a footprint here. You need to be doing the majority of the project here. There's a limit of one project every 2 years, also something that was added to the statute. So if you receive a phase 1 and a phase 2, or if you receive multiple phase 1s within a 2-year period, we can only fund one of those projects. We'd be able to fund phase 1, phase 2, and then it kind of resets and you'd be able to do to move forward there. So you can't get matches or get multiple matches for the program in that 2-year period. 4.8 million award across 107 project phases, matched by 18.4 million federal funding since 2011. So that's pretty respectable. We really hope that this program is increasing and continues to increase the number of solicitations and responses that the federal agencies get from Nebraska-based companies as it raises awareness. I think that's something that, it makes our funds go further. So it's very much federal agencies have quite a bit more that they can disseminate. A couple of things I touch upon. NBDC has been great about helping with SBIR and STTR, and I would really lean on them. We're a 2-person team, but especially at UNO, they're at UNK. There's people who can provide a lot of guidance there that we don't have the capacity to do. And they bring a lot of federal agencies through to do road tours and set up some great meet and greets. And this is a relationship-based program. I think that you need to meet the people who are writing those solicitations and help make a case. Just like our program, so this is a good project to fund. So a number of the companies that we've funded, they haven't gotten an SBIR in their first go around, but maybe they got it their second or their third or their fourth. And I think it's worth your time to reach out to NBDC and talk to them and utilize their services, and then meet with those federal agencies before drafting something. It's a long-term process, but it really can be beneficial. And once some agencies know what you do, there's a manufacturer out of Roca that has gotten multiple SBIRs and is doing quite well, and they are working with the Navy to build multiple different systems. So I think that's the path to go down if you want to build that relationship. It's worth your time to do. Some examples of projects we've done. So Ignis is drone amplified. They actually started with a prototype grant again, and they are a couple of university people who, one took a sabbatical and they hired some people and they had some expertise in drones. They started with one project and ended up doing something completely different, which is around fire management, where a drone will actually go around and do prescribed burns. They found a niche where they're really working with the Department of the Interior and managing federal forests and federal parkland and things like that. Doing those prescribed burns, the way that it was normally done, people would go around an ATV with a drip torch, not the safest method. Now they can actually drop small spheres that will start fires, which sounds kind of crazy, and maybe is, but it's very interesting as well. They received a prototype grant initially, built out their initial system, and now they've got a really nice SBIR that they're working on. The Sanguine Diagnostics and Therapeutics, they got an NIH fast track, which is kind of an interesting thing, where they got a phase 1 and a phase 2 under one solicitation, got that response, and have they're UNMC researchers that are working on pancreatic cancer detection system, so non-invasive detection systems. That's I really like that one too. CellGrow, and they're kind of a newer company, or been around for a little while, but they're really kicking off their innovation campus. They have a cell therapy project with an NIH STTR, the Small Business Tech Transfer. So those are a few of the projects that we've funded or matched some of the funding, and I hopefully we'll see more of that. A little bit about our application review process. We are setting up a new online application portal we're utilizing different software service product. Now we're moving to a new one, but that's the URL for our kind of our general information page. We'll have a link to our guidelines and the application portal once we launch. Our application cycle starts every year on July 1st. We hope that we will be able to launch a little bit early this year and start considering applications prior to that. But really, we can't make any payments until July 1st. We have the flexibility to take applications, but the coronavirus situation is kind of shifted things. We don't know what our department budget is not locked in yet. And because we are paid, or this program is paid for by general funds, we're going to wait until we know exactly what that is. That could be 2 weeks. That could be all the way up to July 1st. But if you are interested in hearing more about that and keeping up to date on that, either check that link or email me, and I will add you to a notification wait list. We have quite a few people on that list, and I will be sending out some updates once we know more. Once we do start awarding projects, the cycle will continue until the funds are exhausted. Last year, we had a bit of an anomalous year where we had less funding to disseminate, so we only were able to fund projects through the end of November. So we've kind of been in limbo, and there's some pent-up demand there. Usually those funds last longer, 9 to 12 months, but it is an open application cycle. We don't have deadlines, but when we're done for the year, we're done. So it is reviewed we have an internal review committee, and we meet every other week. So we have 3 voting members on that. They review every project that passes through. Nisha and myself do not vote on projects. We are essentially advocates. It's kind of a VC advocacy model where we present the project and they ask questions. And if we don't know the answer, then we'll go back to the applicant. But we're kind of the liaison, and where our job is to understand what you're trying to do and then present those materials. But your written materials do count for a lot. So because that's the first introduction to the 3 voting members. If the majority approves the project, then we will then we discuss what level we can fund it at. So especially for prototype projects, a lot of people ask for the $150,000. We come back with an offer and say, well, here's what we can do, and you can rescope your project as appropriate. So that's especially one. So it's kind of a 2-step process in the review. The project costs can only be incurred within the contract period. The contract period starts as soon as our review is finalized and done. So this is something that rewards planning. You need to plan out your project and say, here's what we want to do. But don't buy anything. Don't commence work if you expect for a cost to be shared on that, because it needs to be invoiced after the contract date starts. Which is usually the date of approval. So we try to get these reviewed within a couple of weeks. We usually say 1 to 3 weeks, every 2 weeks since we're reviewing it. If we have a big backlog of applications, we do it in order received, so that can slow some things down. But in general, the more complete the application is and the better format it is, more easy it is to understand, the faster it is to review. And then we can, once we hear from our review committee and we get a final approval, then we'll send an email with a start date. Usually that's at least the same week that we do the review. So not a long wait, I would say. SBIR solicitations can take 6 months to hear back. We're more like 1 month max. So eligible project costs, we make payments, as I just said earlier, on an ad hoc basis. So you fill out a reimbursement request form essentially, and then we set you up with an ACH to make payments via direct deposits. And that's a share of that. So you do need to document the expenses and the proof of payment for most of our projects. So, for example, if you're doing an academic R&D and you have a payment schedule that might be 50, 25, 25 for a $100,000 project, You pay that $50,000 and then you submit that and we would reimburse our share. If that's 50% of 50,000, it'd be 25. That could be a little bit, depending, that there are situations where some payments are larger than others. And if you're doing academic R&D, especially where there's some pretty big payments being made, if you have an invoice, we might be able to prepay our portion of the project as well. So we do have that flexibility. We'll just need some documentation on that. So don't have that. If liquidity is an issue, let us know and we can maybe work through that. And like I said before, guidelines provide the different contract timelines for specific programs. For example, prototype, project can't last more than 2 years. That is not the case for academic R&D. There's some certain dates and things that you should probably be aware of. There's also retention and clawback information for specific programs. I'd say for prototype, just be aware that if we are funding a project, we do expect that you retain a presence within the state for a minimum of 3 years. If you leave the state and decide to relocate voluntarily, then that we do have a clawback provision in there. If there's an exit event where operations cease in Nebraska, then that would also trigger a clawback of those funds. So that's the one I know the best. We typically don't have to exercise that, and I hope we don't have to. So, but it is something that you should be aware of. If you have questions about that, please reach out to us. Last slide, a little bit of economic impact. May not be topical to this or germane to this discussion, but we do an economic impact analysis every 2 years. Last one was 2018. Funded businesses raise about $4.50 for every $1 BIA funding, and similar in revenue. As we mature, we expect those numbers to grow a little bit, but the Bureau of Business Research came up with some numbers for us and ran it through in plan, and ultimately our $30 million has added $280 million of annual economic impact. And those job numbers were 2 years ago. And hopefully when we do it this year, we will get some updated numbers for you. So yeah, and that's our contact information and the programs that we typically administrate. Prefer to reach out via email, especially at this time since everybody's working virtually. It's a lot easier to set up calls and Zoom meetings via email. So if you have questions about prototype, academic R&D, or SEED, reach out to me. Nisha can answer SBIR, STTR questions, or micro enterprise questions, or SEED questions as well. So yeah, with that, I'll hand it back to Ryan real quick, and then let's see where we go from there. We'll answer some questions.
Thank you so much, Ben. I really appreciate you doing the overview on all of those. I've got some slides here, but I think just because of the time, I think I'd rather spend it on question and answers. I'll just give you our audience just the early and often suggestion. If you have questions that are related to your specific campus policies and engagement, talk to your research administration group. I know those look slightly different at each of the campuses. And also be talking with the technology commercialization entity that works with your campus, which can be both New Tech Ventures and or Unimed, depending on where you're at, because there will be issues related to confidentiality, background intellectual property, foreground, and in some instances, licenses, and those terms that will be there. And we really want to be in a position where, before Ben and his colleagues see the proposal, the company and the university faculty member who are doing the contemplated work are aligned not only on the technical aspects, but also that the university and the company are aligned on the administrative and the business terms and conditions of the work. So please contact, your tech transfer office and your sponsors program office early and often. There is a very, I will distribute to the industry relations officers, of New Connections and the research administration on each of the campuses a budget template that has been developed by Elijah Luby here in sponsored programs at UNL, which you can use, that makes the budgeting pretty slick and pretty easy due to the differences in the rates that are applied to the state originated funding versus the company originated funding. So with that, I think there was a question that I want to address, but I think it's slightly out of the scope of today, and so I'd be happy to take it on any other time, or to provide better direction. But it's about starting a company and what are the parameters at the university. And so there's really three things that you need to there's many things, but in terms of balancing your university employment and your potential outside activity, there's three things that need to be very carefully managed. One is the conflict of commitment, which is your time that you give to your UNL role and your time that you're allotted by Board of Regents policy to work on outside activities. There's a review and approval process that includes your department. The UNL folks can find the reporting form on new grant, and it's called the IOARF. It's the Interest and Outside Activity Reporting Form. And so you can begin the process that way. There's also the conflict of interest issues, which would be related to various financial interests and power relationships that are in place, which can all be managed, and technology and intellectual property would be the last one. Particularly if, because the question was about being eligible to create an SBIR, STTR eligible company for an application, there would probably be a license that would go on from background intellectual property that you had created or that your students had created in your lab. We can talk more fully about that, but I would encourage you to likewise contact either Unimed or NewTek about more information about starting companies.
And we did have a question come in related to that. So staying on that topic, somebody has asked, are full-time faculty eligible for SBIR grants? You want me to take that, Ryan, or do you want to cover that?
Feel free.
Okay. So how it works with SBIR grants is that the PI, the person applies, the business that does apply, that person has to be employed with the business 51%. So that changes your full-time faculty status. So a lot of times when we see grant applications come through, the university involvement may be in a contractual way, they may be consulting on some things, and so that's when pairing with some businesses is a fit. So as Ben had mentioned, our office, Nebraska Business Development Center, works with applicants of SBIR programs, and there's a lot of times and within our ecosystem, we discuss how there are businesses that are interested, they have maybe a solution or an idea, but they need more of the science behind that, right? The technical expertise that faculty members do bring to the table. So, you know, I would encourage you, have conversations with Ben, with Ryan or I, and we can kind of see where those connections might be a fit to make all of the rules fit and to bring together both sides of the table. So we'll get into our list of questions. Some were sent directly to the panel and others were sent to all folks. So the next question is, and we'll touch on a little bit more, it's will available funding for these innovation grants like the prototype grant program be impacted at all by the economic demands surrounding the pandemic in the next fiscal year, or is the budget safe?
Yeah, I touched upon that a little bit, but we really don't know. I talked to some of the people who deal with the budget office at DED earlier this week, and we're still uncertain. It is, you know, we anticipate they anticipate that there will be impact on state agencies. There will be cuts to state agencies. The state can't operate at a deficit like the federal government can. So unless there is some federal money that comes into the states, which is possible, then it will impact our programs. As to whether or not that impacts other programs at DED or it impacts the aid money, we don't know. As we learn more, the best way to stay abreast of that is to actually, contact me and get on the notification list. And once we know what our budget will be, that's when we'll start taking applications, and we'll be transparent about what impact that will have. So hopefully not this year, but we never know.
The next question is, are new energy technology or energy savings programs of interest to any of them? And any of them, I'm guessing the programming. And I think generally you're industry agnostic to a degree, right?
Yep, that's the exact phrase we use, industry agnostic. While we do have an emphasis on bioscience and agriculture, we will look at anything, provided there's going to be a strong, strong path to commercialization and a strong economic impact or a strong, economic development impact to the state. So we have done energy efficiency projects in the past. We've funded one around the electric cars and different things like that. So alternative energies, I'd say, and yeah, I think that's something we'd definitely be interested in discussing.
In terms of the SBIR program, Department of Energy is one of the 12 federal agencies that participates or is required to have a set aside for SBIR. And I'd be happy to help you take a look at that in terms of if your solution or your research fits in terms of their solicitation and what they're looking to fund. The next question is the academic R&D grant related to university POC funding? What technology readiness level does it require, and how to apply? You addressed the how to apply piece. So then what we're looking at is university POC funding. I'm hoping one of the two of you knows what that acronym is. And then what technology readiness level does it require?
It's completely unrelated to POC funding.
So for those who don't know what that means, POC funding?
That's proof of concept funds that are administered by essentially David Jackson's group over in Varner Hall at the system level. And those funds are somewhat discretionary to support commercialization of university technology that is still within the university. And you can contact either Unimed or New Tech Ventures if you have the TRL level was mentioned. If you have something that's mid high TRL, it may be appropriate for that. Those funds are very selective, and I'm not aware whether there's been any changes that are being considered going into the next fiscal year with those, given the imminent budget reductions we'll be facing.
Our next question is, does BIA support formation of consortia involving Nebraska businesses in similar industry sectors?
Interesting. So I would say that this is probably not the best fit for the consortium. If you are all collaboratively pursuing a product development or research product that could mutually benefit multiple companies, that is fine. We've been approached about that in the past. I'm not sure any of those have come to fruition. So you have multiple manufacturers that all want to invest in a specific technology line that you think that one could stand up or multiple could stand up and commercialize. That would make sense. We do have, in our world, we have a group that talent and workforce group that has worked with, and at one time we were doing MEP, our department as well, the Manufacturing Extension Partnership, which is now, I believe, at the University of Nebraska. But they, I would say that those groups that are doing consortiums to discuss issues and better rally around causes. We have some of those, and we've done those in the past around information technology, IT things, software development, healthcare, manufacturing. There's been a lot of, it's been fragmented and it's hard to go around. So it really depends on what the what the intent is there. If it's product development, yes. If it's just a kind of get together and discuss issues and try to move in direction, that would be a different path. And I'd encourage you to reach out to Allison Hatch in that case at our department and maybe see if any of those groups are still going, or she might be able to point you in that right direction.
Our next question is, will your office, and by that I'm guessing Ben with the ED, apply for federal funding to promote COVID-19 related tech development in Nebraska?
That would be probably not a question for me. Our programs are off the shelf. They're prescribed by legislature. They're laid out by legislature. The programs we discussed today are, simply what we can do. So unless it's an SBIR or STTR, the federal funding program is not something you can do. I don't know what the remainder of our office is doing in terms of COVID-19 economic development funding. I'm not aware of anything at this time. Things move a little bit slower than some other areas. We are working with trying to get through $150 million of funding from the flood disaster from last year on the housing community development side of it. So I would just say that we have a page for COVID-19 related resources on our webpage, and that's probably the best we can do, or I can do at this time. So I apologize, but I don't know.
I know I was on a call last week with Michael Dixon, so again with UNMC and UNIMED, and I didn't take all the notes on this, so I apologize for not having clear details. I know there are some facts that they're looking at some research there, specifically obviously related to, I would guess, vaccination, some of those things. So I know UNIMED is doing some things, whether it's federally funded, I don't know. A lot of, I think, university researchers, things like that, are funding internally at this point. NSRI, so the National Strategic Research Institute, that's part of the University of Nebraska, they might be pursuing some things in collaboration with Stratcom, so I would take a look there for additional opportunities. I think some of these are just going to be coming to light, so I would check with your respective institution to see what may or may not be transpiring right now. Let's see, the next one, make sure I'm on the right track here. The question is, all projects should be applied by staff of UNL, UNO. I'm not sure the question on that, if they're wondering who should apply or how that works. I think it's going to be dependent on the program. A lot of times there needs to be a business connection, and that is the one that applies. So
the business needs to apply. It needs to our office, and it is not, the university will never directly apply for funding. So now, as a researcher, if you are the founder, as Sarah discussed, and you are permitted to apply for an academic R&D grant or an SBIR or STTR grant, then you'd be doing that under the umbrella of the business that you stand up, which would need to be some sort of LLC or anything. We typically also don't fund sole proprietorships, so you really do need to have that business in some format. Now, with academic R&D projects, I will say that gets a little bit muddy because we want you to be working with the university and applying. A lot of times we'll have a sit down before we review the project between me, the business founder, and the university researcher, so that everybody's in the room and we understand what's going on, because our funding is contingent upon having that university relationship. But we have had projects where there is university, the university researcher is part of the team of the business and has some equity stake. We have had projects where they have no interest in pursuing this beyond the scope of that sponsor research agreement. The university is just doing this to advance the research on behalf of the business. So it varies, but I would say, to answer your question, as a researcher, you would never be directly applying for the academic R&D grant. The private for-profit business would be applying.
So I think the New Connections group has talked about doing a follow-on webinar to this once there is some certainty around the budget. And it would be a look a little bit more under the hood as far as what does it look like to prepare a proposal for SBIR STTR. And we would also cover the state program of that as well. And likewise for the academic R&D. It's important that both of these are often for all of the stakeholders, it's a two-step process where there's a contract that's going to exist between the university and the company for the work to be performed. And that will inform the proposal that comes from the company partner to the Department of Economic Development in the case of the academic R&D, or to the federal agency in the instance where the university would either be a subcontractor or for an STTR could even be the PI for those grants. But so we can get into a little bit finer detail, but I guess the headline is treat it like, go through your normal grant processes at your campus, talk to your local grants person, and if you have any questions, again, early and often, your tech transfer office and your sponsored programs office.
And that is the conclusion of our questions, unless you have some more. What I will do is show you some upcoming opportunities. If you happen to think of another question, please send it in. Hopefully what you see, the upcoming opportunities, is that what's shown on your screen? Okay, I did it so fast I thought perhaps I was showing you something else. So some dates that I want you to be aware of. Technology Transfer Day is slated to happen September 9th and 10th. At this point, it was scheduled for about the third week of June. I don't know if everything has been updated on websites and whatnot. This is hosted by National Strategic Research Institute, again, NSRI. Tracy Hancock with their office said that it was happening, whether it ended up being virtual or in person. So essentially you can pitch your innovation to the Department of Defense Tech Scouts. There's a lot of things that Department of Defense funds that the military does need. So be sure to kind of check into that, see the details. Then secondly is the SBIR STTR Road Tour. It was originally slated for June 1 and has been pushed back to October 19th. The program managers from the federal agencies, I don't know if we've heard of all of them are coming, but a large share will be coming to Omaha to schedule one-on-one meetings with companies, so you can meet with those program managers and talk to them about your research or your idea and what you're looking to pursue in terms of their funding opportunities. And so it's a really great way to have that engagement with the program managers. They only select 13 sites a year or something like that. So the last time they came through Nebraska was 4 years ago. So it's a really great opportunity. Maybe even if you think SBIR is not in the near term future for you, might be a little farther off. Great way to just see what it's about. We're going to have some interactive sessions leading up to it. And following it, we're doing a lot of SBIR 101s. And I say we, let me clarify, Nebraska Business Development Center. We are hosting webinars and things. So again, go onto the website, nbdc.unomaha.edu, click down to the events. That's where you'll see all the stuff related to SBIR, things related to tech transfer, the road tour, and whatnot. And we had a link out here for today's webinar as well. So we have a lot of those resources and things available for you to check out. So, you know, I think there's a lot of opportunities we can do right now because there's webinar. There's chances for us all to meet when there's not geographical limitations. So take advantage of what you can. And just want to say thank you to our faculty that joined us today. I realized that the end of semester and a semester unlike any other is approaching. So thanks for taking time out of your afternoon. We do appreciate that. And the opportunity to partner with businesses is very important. And our final question is, can you please send the recording of this webinar to participants? Yes. We'll have to see how that works and if there's a file limitation. We will make sure that you find a way to get it or access it on one of our websites, and we'll send that link to you for sure. Gentlemen, Ben, Ryan, any other thoughts for the participants before we close out?
No, thank you for having me. I think that, you know, we have an open door policy, so we love to meet and talk about things and share. So I think that if you have questions, you can reach out to us directly, and we try to address those. Best way is email, ben.kuspa, KUSPA, at nebraska.gov. Thanks.
Yeah, and I just wanted to echo, Sarah, thanks for everybody. I know there's a lot of demands on everyone's time, personal, professional, and you chose to spend some of your day learning about, these important programs, and we really appreciate it. In talking with colleagues from around the country, I mean, these really are standout programs that really help to drive these, in-state relationships, and they're just great ways to incent those on the front end of things. There's nothing like having a meeting about a potential collaboration and being able to say, oh yeah, and by the way, we might be able to get hundreds of thousands of dollars to support what we're doing on top of, what cash might be available in your budget. So really do take advantage of these to open up some discussions with some of the Nebraska companies. And don't forget that they're not limited to those companies that are just headquartered here. Costco has utilized these programs, Merck Animal Health. There are big companies that are in Nebraska that are more than happy to, advance their work with you with doing these things. And so really take a good hard look at them. And I also wanted to thank Ben, not just for, his participation on the webinar today. He's really just been an incredible, collaborator in this process. He means it when he says the open door policy. Nisha and he are just so easy to work with. It is such a friendly process. This is nothing like a federal proposal or process. This is a very quick turnaround. This is very collaborative. It's a really great program. And, likewise, thanks to Sarah for, making sure that everything isn't just happening in Omaha and Lincoln, despite the fact that we hear a lot about that. And we really want to extend, the reach of the NU off 500 miles wide. And we want to be able to help any innovator or any entrepreneurial scientist that's out there, wherever they're at, whether they're in Scottsbluff, Kearney, Omaha, or elsewhere, to be able to help them. And so that's really the point of the New Connections group. And so reach out to your industrial liaison officer on your campus and see if they can help you. Again, thank you, Suzanne Spies, very much for coordinating everything. And I think with that, we'll probably thank everyone and go ahead and close and wish you and yours to be well, be safe, take care, and bless you all.
Thank you. Take care, Ryan.
Thanks.
Everybody.